The penthouse suite on the 47th floor of Manhattan's most exclusive building held a silence so profound it felt like death itself had taken resident. Marcus Thorne sat motionless in his leather chair, staring through floor-to-ceiling windows at a city that sparkled with life. He no longer felt connected. His reflection in the glass showed a man who had everything and nothing simultaneously, a billionaire tech mogul at 34, who had conquered Silicon Valley, but lost the only battle that mattered. 3 months. That's how long it had been since the accident. 3 months since the drunk driver had run the red light. 3 months since his wife Elena had been ripped from this world, leaving behind a fortune that meant nothing and a 6-month-old daughter who refused to live. Mr. Thorne, the tentative voice of his housekeeper, Mrs. Chen, broke through his trance. The baby. She's not eating again. That's the bottle she's refused today. The pediatrician said if she doesn't start taking more, we'll need to consider. I know what he said. Marcus's voice came out hollow, emotional. He couldn't even bring himself to say his daughter's name in it. Sophia. Elena had chosen it, spent hours debating between that and Isabella before settling on Sophia Grace Thorne. Now the name felt like knives in his throat. Mrs. Chen wrung her hands, her withered face creased with worry. She needs her father, Mr. Thorne. I don't know what else to do. She just lies there, barely crying anymore. It's like she's given up. A baby, giving up on life. The absurdity of it should have struck him as impossible, yet Marcus knew it was true. He'd seen it in Sophia's eyes, those grey-green eyes, so much like Elena's emptiness that mirrored his own. Even the pediatrician had been alarmed, using terms like failure to thrive and psychological withdrawal. At 6 months old, his daughter was choosing death over life without her mother. Marcus understood perfectly. He'd been making the same choice every day since the funeral, just in slower motion. The board of directors at Thorne Technologies ran the company now. He signed whatever they put in front of him. His assistant fielded calls, managed his calendar, kept the world at bay. He existed in this glass tower like a ghost, going through motions that meant nothing. Perhaps Mrs. Chen hesitated, clearly weighing whether to continue. Perhaps it's time to consider the nanny service again. The one that specializes in no, the word came out sharp, final. We've been through 6 nannies in 3 months, each one more qualified than the last. None of them made any difference. This agency is different. They handle difficult cases, traumatized children, special needs, complex family situation. The woman I spoke with said they have someone who might be perfect. She's young, but she has a gift with babies who... I said no. Marcus stood abruptly, his 6'2" frame casting a long shadow across the marble floor. Sophia doesn't need another stranger coming in with theories and methods and false hope. She needs... He couldn't finish the sentence. She needs her mother. The only thing in the universe Marcus couldn't give her, despite his billions, despite his connection, despite his willingness to trade everything he owned for just one more day with Elena. The tablet on his desk buzzed with notifications he'd ignore. Stock prices, meeting requests, business deals that used to electrify him. Now they were just noise. TechCrunch had run an article last week. The fall of a titan. Is Marcus Thorne finished? Let them write what they wanted. Let the company crumble. Nothing mattered. Mr. Thorne, please? Mrs. Chen's voice cracked with emotion. That baby is wasting away. She's lost weight. She barely responds to stimuli. If something doesn't change soon, she left the rest unsaid. But Marcus heard it clearly. His daughter was dying by inches and he was letting it happen. He moved to the window, pressing his palm against the cold glass. Somewhere 47 floors below, the city pulsed with life. People rushing to meetings, grabbing coffee, laughing with friends, falling in love, breaking hearts, making mistakes, finding joy. The whole beautiful, terrible, mundane miracle of human existence carrying on as if the world hadn't ended the night a drunk driver crossed that intersection. Behind him, he heard Mrs. Chen's soft footsteps retreating, pausing. I've left the agency's number on your desk. The woman's name is Lily. Lily Parker. They say she's different, that she understands loss in a way others don't. All I ask is that you consider it. For Sophia's sake. The door clicked shut, leaving Marcus alone with his reflection and his demons. He turned to look at the slip of paper on his desk. The handwriting was Mrs. Chen's careful script. Parker's touch specialized care for special circumstances. Below it, a phone number. Name, Lily Parker. Marcus crumpled the paper in his fist, fully intending to throw it away. His hand hovered over the trash can for a long moment. Then, against every instinct telling him that nothing could help, that hope was just another form of torture, he smoothed the paper flat and tucked it into his pocket. Down the hall, in a nursery decorated in soft yellows and white colors Elena had chosen with such joy. Sophia lay in her crib, her tiny chest rising and falling in shallow breaths. The mobile above her head played a lullaby she didn't respond to. Her eyes, when they were open, stared at nothing. She'd stopped reaching for toys, stopped cooing, stopped doing any of the things babies were supposed to do. The pediatrician's words echoed in Marcus's mind. I've seen this before, in orphanages, in situations of severe neglect, but never in a home where the child is physically cared for. It's as if she senses the emotional void and has simply withdrawn from life. Babies need more than food and shelter, Mr. Thorne. They need connection, love, hope. Without it, they can simply fade away. Marcus pulled out his phone, staring at the screen for what felt like an eternity. His thumb hovered over the keypad. What was the point? Another nanny, another failure, another person who would look at him with pity and judgment, another stranger who would marvel at his empty mansion, his absent emotion, his inability to save his own daughter. But then he thought of Elena, vibrant, brilliant Elena, who had believed in second chances and fighting against impossible odds. She'd been a pediatric surgeon, had spent her life saving children. What would she say if she could see them now? Her husband and daughter, both giving up, both choosing death by inches? Damn it, Marcus whispered into the empty room. He dialed the number before he could change his mind. It rang 3 times. Then a voice answered, not the professional, chipper tone of a service, but something softer, almost musical. Parker's touch. This is Lily. Marcus opened his mouth, then closed it. What did he even say? How did he explain the inexplicable? Hello. The voice came again, patient but questioned. My daughter is dying, Marcus said finally, the words ripping from somewhere deep inside him. And I don't know how to stop it. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Not the awkward silence of someone uncomfortable, but something else. A breath, a moment of consideration. Then, tell me about her. And for the first time in 3 months, Marcus Thorne began to speak about his daughter as if she was something more than a problem to be solved or a tragedy to be endured. He talked about her eyes, about the way she'd smiled in those first weeks, about how she'd stopped. He talked about the accident, about Elena, about the unbearable weight of grief that had settled over his home like a shroud. Lily Parker listened to it all, and when he finally fell silent, emotionally exhausted from the most words he'd strung together in months, she said something that changed everything. I'll be there tomorrow morning at 8. And Mr. Thorne, don't give up yet. Sometimes the darkest moments come right before the breakthrough. Sometimes all it takes is one person walking in who refuses to accept that hope is lost. The line went dead. Marcus stood in his empty penthouse, clutching his phone, and for the first time since the accident, felt something crack in the wall of ice surrounding his heart. It wasn't hope, he didn't dare call it that, but it was something. A tiny fracture in the absolute certainty that nothing would ever matter again. In her nursery, Sophia sighed in her sleep, a small sound in a silent house. And across the city, a young woman with sad eyes and determined heart packed a bag for a case that everyone else had given up on. Tomorrow would change everything. Neither of them knew it yet, but tomorrow, life would walk through the door in the form of a 26-year-old nanny who understood that sometimes the only way to save someone else is to save yourself in the process. The arrival Lily Parker stood outside the Thornton Tower at 7:45 in the morning, her worn canvas bag slung over one shoulder, staring up at the gleaming structure that disappeared into the low-hanging clouds. The building was all glass and steel, reflecting the grey October sky back at itself, beautiful, cold, and utterly impenetrable. Much like the man she was about to meet, she suspected. She'd done her research, of course. You didn't walk into a billionaire's home without knowing exactly who you were dealing with. Marcus Thorne, 34, founder and CEO of Thorne Technologies, the company that had revolutionized cloud computing and artificial intelligence integration. Net worth, somewhere north of $8 billion. Graduated from MIT at 20, had his first patent at 22, built an empire by 30. Married Elena, pediatric surgeon, 5 years ago. One child, Sophia Grace Thorne, born 4 months before the accident that had killed her mother. The tabloids had been brutal in their coverage. Photos of the crash scene, speculation about Marcus's mental state, think pieces about whether grief had destroyed one of tech's brightest minds. Lily had ignored most of it, focusing instead on the sparse facts. A drunk driver, a red light, a woman who died doing everything right. The randomness of it was almost obscene, but Lily understood randomness. She understood how life could be perfect one moment and shattered the next, how the universe didn't care about your plans, your goodness, your potential. How everything you loved could be ripped away in a heartbeat, leaving you hollow and wondering why you were still breathing when they weren't. She adjusted the strap of her pack and walked through the revolving doors into a lobby that screamed wealth in that particular way only architect design minimalism could achieve. All clean lines, expensive marble, and strategic lighting. A security desk manned by 2 guards in crisp uniforms stood between her and the elevator bank. "Lily Parker," she said, approaching with a confidence she'd learned to fake years ago. "I have an appointment with Marcus Thorne." 8 o'clock. The older guard, his name tag reading Davis, consulted his computer screen with the gravity of a man protecting nuclear codes. "ID, please." Lily handed over her driver's license, watching as he scrutinized it as if she might be an international spy, rather than a nanny with a decade-old Honda and a studio apartment in Queens. Finally, he printed out a visitor badge and gestured toward the elevator. 47th floor, penthouse level. "The elevator is keyed. This badge will get you up." He paused, his expression softening slightly. "Good luck up there, Mr. Thorne." "He's been through a lot," Lily nodded, taking the badge. The elevator was as luxurious as everything else, paneled in what looked like real wood, with a small chandelier casting prismatic light across the space. As it whisked her outward, she closed her eyes and did what she always did before a new case. She breathed, centered herself, and pushed away everything that didn't matter. Her own pain, her own history, her own doubts. None of that had a place in the work she was about to do. The elevator doors opened directly into the penthouse, and Lily stepped into a space that took her breath away despite her determination to remain professional. The entire wall facing her was glass, offering a panoramic view of Manhattan that made her feel like she was floating above the city. The interior was all whites and grays, modern furniture that probably cost more than she made in a year, and an oppressive silence that felt like a physical prison. A small Asian woman emerged from a side hallway, relief washing over her face. "Miss Parker?" "Oh, thank God. I'm Mrs. Chen, the housekeeper." "Mr. Thorne is in his office, but..." She lowered her voice. "The baby's in the nursery. She's awake, but she's not crying. She never cries anymore. It's unnatural." The silence. Lily's heart clenched. She'd worked with failure to thrive babies before. Children who'd been neglected or traumatized, but never one from a home like. Never one who should have had everything. "Can I see her first, before I meet Mr. Thorne?" Mrs. Chen looked uncertain, then nodded. "This way, but..." "Please be prepared. She's not. She doesn't look good." They walked down a hallway lined with photographs Marcus and Elena's wedding, vacation shots, candids of a couple so clearly in love it hurt to look at them. And then, newer photos. Elena pregnant, glowing with joy. Elena holding a newborn Sapphire in a hospital, exhausted and radiant. Marcus kissing his wife's forehead while cradling his daughter, his face transformed by a happiness that Lily knew no longer existed. The nursery door was ajar. Mrs. Chen pushed it open gently, and Lily stepped inside. The room was beautiful soft yellow walls, white furniture with delicate floral detail, shelves full of books and toys that looked barely touched. A mobile hung over the crib, rotating slowly and playing a tinkling melody. And in the crib, lying perfectly still, was the smallest, most heartbreaking thing Lily had ever seen. Sapphire was tiny, far too small for a 9-month-old. Her cheeks were hollow, her skin pale, her limbs thin. But it was her eyes that struck Lily like a blow to the chest. They were open, staring at the ceiling with an emptiness that no baby should possess. There was no curiosity, no engagement, no spark of life, just vacancy. "Oh, sweetheart," Lily whispered, moving to the crib. She didn't reach for the baby immediately. Years of experience had taught her that broken children needed to be approached carefully, with respect for their trauma. Instead, she simply stood where Sapphire could see her, making herself present without being overwhelming. "Hello, Sapphire. My name is Lily. I'm going to be spending some time with you, if that's okay." She kept her voice soft. "I know the world feels pretty terrible right now. I know you miss your mama. I know everything hurts." The baby's eyes flickered slightly in her direction, the first sign of awareness Mrs. Chen had seen in days. The housekeeper gasped softly from the doorway. Lily continued speaking, not about anything in particular, just letting her voice fill the oppressive silence. She talked about the sunrise she'd seen on the subway ride over, about the way the city looked from up here, about how she'd once known a baby who'd loved yellow, just like this nursery. She didn't try to pick Sapphire up, didn't force interaction. She just existed in the space, offering presence without demand. After a few minutes, Sapphire's head turned slightly toward Lily. It was the smallest movement, barely perceptible,
but it was something.
Connection, however tenuous. That's right, Lily said gently.
I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere. What are you doing?
The voice from the doorway was deep, gruff, edged with suspicion. Lily turned to find Marcus Thorne standing in the hallway, and her first thought was that the photographs hadn't prepared her.
In pictures, he'd been handsome in that polished, corporate-way strong jaw, intense eyes, confident smile. The man before her was haggard, his dark hair unkempt, his face gaunt with grief. He wore sweatpants and a wrinkled t-shirt, and his eyes held the same emptiness as his daughter's.
I'm talking to her, Lily said simply.
Introducing myself, she's a baby.
She doesn't understand words. His tone was flat, dismissive.
She understands more than you think. Babies are incredibly intuitive.
They read emotion, energy, intention. Your daughter knows she's not alone right now. That matters. Marcus stared at her for a long moment, and Lily met his gaze steadily.
She dealt
with skeptical parents before, with people who thought they knew everything about children simply because they'd produced one. But she also saw the desperation behind his hostility, the fear that letting himself hope would only lead to more pain. You're younger than I expected, he said finally.
I'm 26, but I've been doing this work since I was 16. I've probably seen more troubled children than most people twice my age. She turned back to Sophia. Your daughter is beautiful. She has your bone structure and her mother's eyes. She heard him inhale sharply at the mention of Elena.
When she glanced back, his face had gone even paler, if that was possible. Don't, he said, his voice breaking slightly. Don't talk about my wife like you knew her. I didn't know her. Lily agreed.
But I can see what she left behind. In this nursery she decorated, in these photos on the walls, in this baby who misses her so much she's willing to die to be with her.
Elena laughed hard.
That's
clear. Marcus's hand gripped the doorframe so tightly his knuckles went white.
What makes you think you can help? 6 other nannies have tried.
All of them failed.
What makes you different?
Lily carefully reached into the crib, letting her fingers brush gently against Sophia's tiny hand. The baby's fingers twitched, then slowly, almost imperceptibly, curled around Lily's pinky finger.
It was the weakest grip imaginable, but it was intentional.
It was engagement.
This, Lily said softly, her own eyes stinging with unexpected tears. This makes me different. I'm not here to fix your daughter with techniques or methods or professional distance. I'm here to love her back to life.
Because that's the only thing that's going to work. The first day, Marcus stood frozen in the doorway of his daughter's nursery, watching this young woman who'd walked into his home 20 minutes ago hold his daughter's attention in a way no one had managed in 3 months.
Sophia's tiny fingers remained wrapped around Lily's pinky, the grip so faint, it was almost imperceptible. But it was there. It was real. It was the first voluntary movement his daughter had made in weeks. How did you do that?
His voice came up hoarse, disbelieving. Lily didn't look away from Sophia. I didn't do anything.
She did. She chose to reach out.
I just made myself available for her to reach toward. She began to hum softly, a melody Marcus didn't recognize, something melancholic and beautiful. The other nannies, what were they like?
Marcus ran his hand through his unkempt hair, trying to remember.
The past 3 months were a blur of well-meaning professionals who'd cycled through his home, like rotating shifts.
Qualified, experienced.
The first one had a PhD in child psychology.
The second came from the British nanny school, whatever that's called. They all had impressive resumes, and they all tried to treat Sophia like a problem to be solved. It wasn't a question.
Lily finally looked up
at him, and Marcus was struck by her eyes, dark brown, almost black, with depths that suggested she'd seen her own share of darkness. They probably had schedules, developmental exercises, feeding protocols.
Very professional.
Very detached. Isn't that what you're supposed to do?
Stay professional.
With a normal child, maybe.
With a traumatized baby who's giving up on life. Lily shook her head.
Professional distance is the last thing Sophia needs. She needs to feel connected again.
2.
Remember that human contact can be safe, warm and loving. She needs to feel what she felt with her mother. The mention of Elena sent a fresh stab of pain through Marcus's chest.
You can't replace her mother. I'm not trying to. Lily's voice was patient, but firm.
Elena can never be replaced.
But Sophia needs love anyway.
She needs to feel like she matters to someone, like her existence brings joy instead of grief. Right now, everyone in this apartment is grieving.
She can feel it.
Babies are
emotional sponges. They absorb everything around them.
She's drowning in sadness. Marcus wanted to argue, to tell this presumptuous stranger that she had no idea what she was talking about, but the words died in his throat.
Because she was right.
The entire penthouse was saturated with grief, his grief, Mrs. Chen's worry, the oppressive weight of loss that hung in every room.
Of course, Sophia felt it.
How could she not? So what do you propose? He asked, his voice heavy with exhaustion. That we
All just stop grieving?
pretend everything's fine. No, Lily's response was gentle. Grief is natural, necessary, but we need to create spaces where Sophia can experience something other than loss, where she can feel joy, safety, connection. We need to show her that life is still worth living, even though her mother is gone. And how exactly do you plan to do that?
Lily was quiet for a moment, her thumb stroking the back of Sophia's hand with infinite tenderness.
First, I'm going to sit
Here with her.
Just be present.
Let her get used to me. Then, when she's ready, and only when she's ready, I'll pick her up.
Hold her.
Show her that touch can be comforting again. She doesn't like being held.
She cries when anyone picks her up. She cries because she expects disappointment. Every time someone holds her, she hopes for a moment that it's her mother.
And then she realizes it's not, and the grief hits her all over again.
We need to teach her that being held by someone else can,
Still be good, different from her mother, yes.
but still worthwhile. Marcus leaned against the doorframe, suddenly feeling the weight of his sleepless nights and grief-stricken days. You sound very certain.
Like you've done this before. I have.
Not exactly this, but similar situations.
I've worked with children who've lost parents, who've been abused, who've decided the world isn't safe enough to engage with.
They're all different,
But the core truth is always the same. Love heals.
not quickly, not easily, but eventually. Love. Marcus said the word like it was foreign, incomprehensible. I'm her father.
I love her.
It hasn't helped. Lily looked at him then, really looked at him, and Marcus felt uncomfortably seen.
You love her.
But you're not present with her.
When's the last time you held your daughter, Mr. Thorne?
Really held her, not just picked her up when necessary. Marcus's jaw tightened.
I don't.
I can't. He couldn't finish the sentence. The truth was too painful. Every time he looked at Sophia, he saw Elena.
The same eyes, the same delicate features.
Holding his daughter meant confronting everything he'd lost, and he wasn't strong enough for that. It was easier to stay away, to let others care for her physical needs while he drowned in his own grief. You're afraid, Lily said, her voice devoid of judgment.
Afraid that if you love her too much, it'll hurt more if you lose her too.
Afraid that engaging with her means accepting that Elena is really gone.
Afraid that your daughter needs you, and you're not sure you have anything left to give. Marcus felt something crack inside him, some wall he built to keep the worst of the pain at bay.
How dare you? I lost my sister when I was 16. Lily interrupted, her voice steady despite the emotion flickering across her face.
Car accident.
She was 22, vibrant, full of life. She had a daughter, my niece, Maya.
3 years old.
After the funeral, Maya stopped talking, just stopped. Selective mutism, they called it. Trauma-induced, Marcus found himself listening despite his anger.
Everyone wanted to fix her. Therapists, specialists, well-meaning relative.
They all had methods and theories, but Maya just retreated further.
Until one day, I was babysitting her, and I just
Broke down, started crying.
told her how much I missed her mother, how unfair it all was, how I didn't know how to live in a world where my sister didn't exist,
And Maya climbed into my lap.
and put her little hand on my cheek.
She didn't speak, but she was present.
Connected.
It was the first time since the accident that she'd engaged with anyone. Lily's eyes were bright with unshed tears.
That's when I understood. Maya didn't need someone to fix her. She needed someone to grieve with her, to acknowledge that her pain was real and valid, to show her that we could survive this terrible thing together. 3 months later, she spoke again. Now she's 12, thriving, happy.
But she still remembers that moment. She told me once that she knew she wasn't alone anymore. That's what saved her. Marcus felt his own eyes burning. So you're saying I need to grieve with my daughter? She's 9 months old.
She doesn't understand. She understands more than you think.
Babies can't process grief intellectually, but they feel it emotionally. And right now, she feels alone in her pain.
You're alone in yours. She's alone in hers. And you're both dying because of it. The words hit.
Marcus like a physical blow. He wanted to deny them, to argue, but he couldn't.
Because this stranger had walked into his home and in 20 minutes had seen what he'd been refusing to acknowledge for 3 months. He and his daughter were drowning separately when they should have been holding each other above water. I don't know how to do this, he whispered, the admission costing him everything.
I know. Lily's voice was infinitely compassionate. That's why I'm here. Not to replace you. Not
To take over. but to guide you back to your daughter.
To help you both remember that you are not alone, Sophia made a small sound, not quite a coo, but not the terrible silence either. Something in between.
Lily smiled down at her, and Marcus saw his daughter's eyes track the movement, watching Lily's face with something that might have been interest.
What do you need from me? Marcus asked, his voice barely audible. For today, nothing. Just let me be with her.
Get to know her rhythms, her
responses, her fears.
Tomorrow, I'll ask you to sit with us.
Just be in the room.
Let her see you and together. So she starts to understand that I'm not replacing you. I'm here to help both of. Marcus nodded slowly, feeling like he was standing on the edge of a cliff.
Taking this leap meant hoping again. And hope was the most terrifying thing in the world when you'd already lost everything.
But looking at his daughter's tiny hand still gripping Lily's finger, he realized he'd already made
the choice. The moment he'd called that number. The moment he'd let Lily through his door, he'd chosen hope.
Now he just had to survive it.
Mrs. Chen will show you where everything is, he said, backing toward the door.
If you need anything, I'll let you know, Lily assured him.
Mr. Thorne, this is going to be hard. Harder than you think.
Recovery isn't linear, and there will be setbacks.
But if you can stay present, stay committed, I believe Sophia can come back to us.
I believe you both.
Can. Marcus left the nursery without responding, but Lily's words echoed in his empty penthouse. You both can.
As if he were a patient too. As if he were also giving up on life, also in need of saving.
The worst part was that she was absolutely right. Breaking through walls, 3 days passed like a slow-motion earthquake, everything shifting beneath the surface while appearing on top.
Lily moved through the penthouse like a gentle storm, disrupting the oppressive silence that had settled
over the space like dust. She opened curtains Marcus had kept closed for months, letting autumn sunlight pour through the floor-to-ceiling window. She played music, soft acoustic melodies that drifted through the halls.
She talked to Sophia constantly, narrating everything she did in a soothing, melodic voice. Now we're going to change your diaper, sweet girl.
I know, not the most fun activity, but we'll make it quick. There we go. Much better, right? Your mama probably sang to you during diaper changes. Maybe she made up silly songs. I bet she had a beautiful voice. Marcus heard these one-sided conversations in his office, where he'd retreated like a wounded animal to its den. Part of him wanted to tell Lily to stop mentioning Elena, to stop making his dead wife's presence so visceral in the apartment. But another part that had been dormant for 3 months, was grateful, because Lily spoke about Elena like she was still part of their lives, like her memory deserved to be honored rather than buried under grief. On the third morning, Lily knocked on his office door at 9 o'clock sharp.
Marcus looked up from the laptop he'd been staring at without seeing for the past hour.
It's time, she said simply. Time for what? For you to sit with your daughter.
I told you I'd give you 3 days to adjust to my presence.
Those 3 days are up. Marcus's stomach clenched.
I don't think that's the problem, Mr. Thorne. You're thinking too much.
Come on. She
didn't wait for his agreement, just turned and walked back toward the nursery with the confidence of someone who expected to be followed.
Marcus found himself standing, his legs moving without conscious decision. He followed Lily down the hallway, past the wedding photos that stabbed at him every time he saw them, past Elena's favorite abstract painting that she'd insisted on hanging even though he'd thought it was ugly.
Now he'd give anything to have her here arguing with him about art again.
The nursery was transformed. It had always been beautiful, but now it felt alive. The curtains were open, revealing the skyline beyond. A colorful playmat had been spread on the floor with toys arranged invitingly. Soft music played from a small speaker, something classical, a piano piece that sounded like Hopefields. Sophia was on the playmat, lying on her back. She wasn't playing with the toys, but her eyes were open, watching the mobile that Lily had positioned where she could see it. She'd gained a little weight over the past 3 days. Her cheeks were still hollow, but slightly less so. The improvement was marginal, almost imperceptible, but Marcus saw it. She ate this morning, Lily said, following his gaze.
4 ounces.
It's not enough, but it's more than she was taking before, and she stayed awake for 2 hours yesterday afternoon. That's progress. Marcus stood awkwardly in the doorway, suddenly aware of how much he'd avoided this room. What do you want me to do? Sit on the floor next to the playmat. Not too close, we don't want to overwhelm her. Just be present in her space. It seemed absurd that he needed instructions on how to be near his own daughter, but Marcus allowed himself to the floor anyway, his back against the wall, about 3 feet from where Sophia lay. This close, he could see how much she changed in 3 months, how much bigger she was than the tiny newborn Elena had placed in his arms at the hospital.
He'd missed so much, hiding in his
grief.
Talk to her. Lily prompted, settling on Sophia's other side. About what?
Anything.
Tell her about your day.
About the weather.
About how you're feeling.
Just let her hear your voice. Remember that you're her father. Marcus's throat felt tight.
I don't know what to say. Lily's expression was patient but firm. Start with the truth. Tell her you're sorry. The words hit him like a punch. I don't. Yes, you do. You're sorry you've been absent. Sorry you've been too lost in your own.
Grief to be there for her. Sorry that she's been dealing with the loss of her mother alone.
Tell her. Marcus looked at his daughter, this tiny person who carried Elena's eyes and his features, who'd been suffering while he'd hidden from his responsibilities. Sophia, his voice cracked.
He cleared his throat and tried again. I'm sorry, baby girl.
I'm so sorry. I should have been here.
Should have held you, talked to you, been your dad. I
couldn't face it.
Every time I look at you, I see your mother. And it hurts so much I can barely breathe. Sophia's eyes moved toward him, actually focused on his face for the first time in months.
The impact of that small movement nearly broke him.
Your mama loved you so much, he continued, tears streaming down his face now. She was so excited when we found out she was pregnant. She read every parenting book, took every class.
She had this whole plan for your life, what she'd teach you, where she'd take you, all the adventures you'd have together. And then she was just
gone. And I didn't know how to do this without her.
I still don't. Lily was crying too, Marcus noted, but she nodded encouragingly.
Keep going.
Tell her about Elena. Tell her the stories. So Marcus did. For the first time since the funeral, he talked about his wife not as an absence, not as a wound, but as a person. He told Sophia about how he'd met Elena at a medical technology conference, how she challenged his presentation with pointed
questions that made him rethink his entire approach.
How she'd been brilliant and stubborn and passionate about saving children's lives. How she'd laughed at his terrible jokes and forced him to take breaks from work to actually live life.
She had this way of making everything an adventure, Marcus said, his voice growing stronger as the memories poured out. Even going to the grocery store with your mother was exciting.
She'd make up stories about the other shoppers, create elaborate backstories.
She made the world magical. He talked about Elena's pregnancy, how she'd glowed, how she talked to Sophia constantly even in the womb, how she played Mozart and read classic literature to her belly,
how scared they'd both been during labor, and how that fear had transformed into overwhelming love the moment Sophia was born.
You were so tiny, Marcus whispered.
6 pounds, 3 ounces.
Perfect little fingers and toes. Your mama cried when she first held you. Happy tears. She said you were the most beautiful thing she'd ever seen.
And she was right. Sophia was watching him intently now, her grey-green eyes locked on his face. Not smiling, that would be too much to hope for, but present.
Engaged, listening to stories about the mother she'd never consciously remember.
You can move closer, Lily said softly.
If you want to. Marcus inched forward slowly, closing the distance until he was right next to the playmat.
Close enough to touch Sophia if he wanted to.
Close enough to see the fine dark hair beginning to grow on her head, the way her chest rose and fell with each breath. The tiny birthmark on her left shoulder that Elena had insisted looked like a heart. Can I? He looked at Lily, suddenly uncertain. Try, she encouraged.
See if she'll let you. Marcus extended his hand, trembling slightly, and gently placed it on Sophia's stomach. She stiffened for a moment. He felt it, that instant of resistance, and he almost pulled away. But then Lily began, humming that melancholic melody she'd been singing 3 days, and Sophia relaxed slightly under his palm.
That's it, Lily murmured. Just let her feel you there. Let her remember that your touch is safe. They sat like that for what felt like hours, but was probably only 15 minutes.
Marcus with his hand on his daughter's stomach, Lily humming quietly, Sophia staring up at the mobile overhead.
It wasn't much, no breakthrough moment, no miraculous healing, but it was something. It was our beginning. I used to read to her, Marcus said suddenly.
When Elena was pregnant, we'd lie in bed at night, and I'd read business articles to her belly. Elena would laugh and say I was going to turn our daughter into a tech mogul before she was even born.
She'd read poetry instead. Maya Angelou, Mary Oliver, Neruda said our baby needed beauty, not quarterly earnings reports. Read to her now, Lily suggested. It doesn't matter what. She'll recognize your voice from those early months, Mrs. Chen appeared in the doorway with a bottle of formula.
It's feeding time.
Should I? Mr. Thorne will do it, Lily said, looking at Marcus with a gentle challenge in her eyes. Won't you? Panic flared in Marcus's chest.
I haven't fed her since.
Since before. He couldn't finish. The last time he'd given Sophia a bottle, Elena had been alive. offering suggestions and laughing at his nervousness.
That's exactly why you need to do it now, Lily said firmly.
Sapphire needs to associate you with comfort, with nourishment, with care.
Mrs. Chen, may I have the bottle?
The housekeeper handed it over, her eyes shining with tears and hope.
Lily turned to Marcus.
Pick her up carefully, support her head.
You remember how?
Marcus's hands shook as he slid them under Sapphire's small body.
She was so light, so fragile.
He lifted her with the care one might use handling ancient glass, settling her in the crook of his arm. She stiffened immediately, her face crumpling with the beginning of what would normally be a wail. Don't panic, Lily said calmly. Talk to her.
Remind her who you are. It's okay, Sapphire, Marcus said, his voice unsteady.
It's Daddy. I've got you. You're safe. He began rocking slightly, the motion coming back instinctively despite the months of disuse.
I know I'm not Mama. I know I'm not who you want.
But I'm here now. I promise I'm here. Sapphire's crying stopped before it really began.
She looked up at him with those eyes, Elena's eyes, and something passed. Between them, recognition.
Maybe even the beginning of trust.
Lily placed the bottle in his free hand. Let her set the pace.
Don't force it. Just offer. And if she's ready, she'll take it. Marcus touched the bottle's nipple to Sapphire's lips.
She turned her head away, rejecting it as she'd rejected countless bottles over the past weeks.
But he didn't give up.
He kept holding her, kept talking softly, kept offering without demanding.
And finally, tentatively, Sapphire's mouth opened. She took the
nipple. She began to drink.
It wasn't much, maybe an ounce, perhaps less. But she was eating from his hand, trusting him to nourish her. Marcus felt tears streaming down his face, but he didn't move to wipe them away.
All his attention was on this moment, this fragile connection reforming between father and daughter.
Good girl, he whispered.
That's my girl. You're doing so good, Sapphire.
Mama would be so proud of you. When Sapphire had taken all she would, Marcus lifted her to his shoulder to
burp her. And without thinking, he kissed her head, something he hadn't done since Elena's death. Sapphire's small body relaxed against him, and for just a moment, the grief that had consumed him shifted enough for love to squeeze through.
Lily was watching them with undisguised emotion on her face.
This, she said softly, is what will save you both.
These moments, not the big breakthroughs, but the small, brave choices to show up, to try,
to love even when it hurts. Marcus looked down at his
daughter, feeling the warmth of her small body against his chest, and realized that somewhere in the past 15 minutes he'd made a choice. Not to stop grieving, that was impossible.
But to grieve while still living, to hurt while still loving, to acknowledge the loss while honoring what remained.
He'd chosen to be Sapphire's father again. Not perfectly, not without fear, but present, finally present. And in his arms, Sapphire's eyes slowly closed, not in the vacant way she'd been sleeping lately,
but peacefully,
trusting.
As if she'd finally found what she'd been missing, her father's love to complement her mother's memory.
Together, maybe they could survive this after all. The rhythm of recovery 2 weeks into Lily's tenure of the Thorne penthouse. A routine had established itself, fragile and new, but undeniably present. Mornings began with Marcus joining Lily in the nursery at 7, helping with Sapphire's first feeding of the day. Afternoons were spent on the play mat, where Marcus, slowly learning to interact with his daughter again, making faces, offering toys, reading board books in a halting voice that grew steadier each day. Evenings belonged to bath time and bedtime stories, rituals that Marcus had avoided for months, but now approached with cautious determination. The change in Sapphire was remarkable. She'd gained nearly a pound, and the hollow look in her eyes was gradually being replaced by curiosity.
She didn't smile yet, that milestone remained frustratingly out of
reach, but she tracked faces, responded to voices, and occasionally made small cooing sounds that felt like victories. The pediatrician, Dr. Morrison, had visited twice and expressed cautious optimism, though he warned against expecting too much too soon.
Failure to thrive isn't reversed overnight, he told Marcus during his last visit.
What you're doing, this consistent presence, this emotional engagement, it's exactly right.
But prepare yourself for setback.
They're inevitable. Marcus was learning that recovery wasn't linear. Some days Sapphire would eat well, stay alert, seem almost like a normal baby.
Other days, she'd retreat back into that terrible vacancy, refusing bottles and staring at nothing.
Those days terrified Marcus, made him wonder if they were losing ground, if the progress had been an illusion. But Lily remained uncheckable. 2 steps forward, 1 step back, she'd say calmly on the difficult days.
That's how healing works. The important thing is that you don't
retreat when she does. You stay present, you stay patient, You stay loving. She needs to know you are not going anywhere. It was late afternoon on a Thursday when Marcus found Lily in the kitchen, preparing Sophia's bottle while the baby napped.
She looked tired, more tired than usual, and there was something in her expression that Marcus had learned to recognize as worry.
"What's wrong?" he asked, pouring himself coffee from the pot Mrs. Chen kept perpetually fresh.
Lily hesitated, measuring
formula with careful precision. Sophia had a rough morning.
Took less than 2 ounces at her 10 o'clock feeding.
Cried for 20 minutes, real crying. Not the weak mewling we've been hearing.
Then exhausted herself and fell asleep. Marcus felt his stomach drop.
That's bad, isn't it?
The crying.
Actually, no. Lily turned to face him, and he saw the tears in her eyes, not from sadness, but something else. Marcus, healthy babies cry.
They cry when they're hungry, uncomfortable, frustrated. Sophia hasn't had the energy to cry properly in months.
This morning, she was angry. She was expressing real emotion, making demands.
That's progress. She was angry.
Marcus tried to wrap his mind around the concept of his tiny daughter experiencing rage.
Furious. I think she wanted to be held, but also wanted her mother. And when I couldn't be Elena, she just let me have it.
Screamed her little head off. Lily smiled through her tears. It was the most beautiful sound I've ever heard.
Marcus found himself laughing, actually laughing for the first time in 3 months. Only you would be happy about making a baby cry, not making her cry. Witnessing her have enough strength and emotional presence to express displeasure. There's a huge difference. Lily finished preparing the bottle, testing the temperature on her wrist in that practiced way Marcus was learning to imitate. She's waking up, Marcus.
Really waking up. Not just physically, but emotionally. And with that comes all the messy, difficult, complicated feelings babies have.
Including anger. I don't know if I can handle her being angry, Marcus admitted.
What if I make it worse? What if You won't. Lily's voice was firm. You're doing everything right. Better than right, actually.
Do you know what Mrs. Chen told me yesterday? She said this is the first time in 3 months she's heard you laugh. The first time she's seen you eat a full meal without being reminded. You're coming back to life too, Marcus.
Sophia feels that. It gives her permission to do the same. Marcus hadn't realized how much he changed until Lily pointed it out. But she was right.
He was sleeping better, not well, but better. He'd started showering daily again, getting dressed in real clothes instead of sweats. He'd even taken a few work calls, enough to keep the board from staging an intervention. Small things, but they added up to something that felt almost like living. I couldn't have done this without you, he said, quietly. Any of this.
I was dying in here, and I didn't even realize it. Lily met his eyes, and Marcus saw something flicker in her expression, something vulnerable and complicated. We're all just trying to survive our losses, Marcus. Sometimes we need help remembering how. Your sister, Marcus said, suddenly wanting to know more about this woman who'd saved his family.
Maya's mother. What was her name? Claire. Lily's smile was sad and beautiful. She was 6 years older than me.
Raised
me, really, after our parents died in a house fire when I was 8.
She was only 14, but she fought to keep us together, refused to let the state separate us into different foster homes. She worked 2 jobs while finishing high school, put herself through nursing school, gave me everything, and then you lost her too. Marcus understood now the depth of Lily's trauma.
She'd lost her parents, then her sister, the only family she had left. Maya, your niece, where is she now?
With Claire's best friend, Rachel.
She adopted her officially 2 years ago. They live in Boston. I visit every month, spend holiday. Maya's thriving. Lily's voice was thick with emotion.
She still misses her MOM. We both do, but she's happy. That's all Claire would have wanted. Is that why you do this work?
Because of what happened with Maya. Lily was quiet for a moment, organizing her thoughts.
Partly.
After Claire died, I was devastated.
Angry at the universe, at God if he exists, at the drunk driver who'd been on his phone.
But watching Maya retreat into silence, seeing her give up,
it gave me something to focus on besides my own grief.
Helping her taught me that love is stronger than loss.
Not more powerful loss still wins in the end.
But love is what makes survival possible. She turned back to the counter, busying her hands with cleaning up the formula preparation area.
After Maya started talking again, I knew this was what I needed to do.
Help children who'd experienced trauma, who'd lost their anchored.
I got my degree in early childhood development, specialized in trauma-informed care. I've worked with dozens of children over the past 8 years. Each one teaches me something new about resilience. And what has Sophia taught you? Marcus asked.
Lily was quiet for so long Marcus thought she might not answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. that sometimes the children aren't the only ones who need saving, that fathers can be just as lost as their babies, that grief is both individual and shared, and neither approach is wrong. We just need to find our way back to each other. The moment hung between them, heavy with unspoken understanding.
Marcus realized with sudden clarity that Lily wasn't just his employee, wasn't just a professional caregiver doing her job. She was a fellow survivor, someone who understood his pain because she carried her own.
They were both broken people trying to piece themselves back
Together while helping a baby do the same. Lily, Marcus started, not sure what he wanted to say, but feeling like something needed to be acknowledged. A cry from the nursery interrupted him. Sophia, awake and making her presence known. Not the weak, helpless sound they'd been hearing for months, but a real, demanding wail.
Both adults smiled at the sound. Your daughter is calling, Lily said, handing him the bottle.
Why don't you get this one?
I think she needs some daddy time. Marcus took
the bottle and headed toward the nursery, marveling at how natural it felt now, this routine of responding to his daughter's need. As he entered the room, he found Sophia in her crib, her face red with effort, her little fists waving in indignation. She was angry that she'd woken alone, angry that no one had immediately appeared, angry at the general injustice of being a baby. It was the most normal, healthy, beautiful display of infant temper Marcus had ever witnessed.
I'm here, baby girl,
he said, scooping her up and settling into the rocking chair, Elena's rocking chair, the one he'd avoided for months. Daddy's here. Let's get some food in that belly, and then maybe we'll read some books. Would you like that? Sophia's crying subsided as he positioned her for feeding.
She latched onto the bottle immediately, drinking with an enthusiasm that made Marcus's heart swell.
This was his daughter fighting, demanding, engaging with life. This was what Lily had promised, not a return to
how things were before, but a new way forward.
As Sophia ate, Marcus found himself talking to her the way Lily did, a constant, gentle narration of thoughts and observation.
You know what, Sophia?
I think we're going to be okay. Not today, not tomorrow, but eventually. We've got each other, and we've got Lily helping us, and that's enough. Your mama would be proud of you. Proud of both of us. He paused, a lump forming in his throat. I miss her so much, baby.
Every single day.
But I'm starting
to remember that missing her doesn't mean I can't also be here with you. That loving her doesn't mean I can't love you too.
I was confused about that for a while.
Thought grief and love couldn't coexist, but Lily's teaching me different, showing me that we can honor your mama's memory while still building a life. Does that make sense?
Probably not. You're 9 months old.
But someday, when you're older, I hope you'll understand. The doorway, unnoticed by Marcus, Lily stood listening.
Tears streamed down her face, not sad tears, but the kind that come when you witness something breaking and healing simultaneously. She'd helped dozens of families, but something about the Thornes had gotten under her skin in a way she hadn't expected.
Marcus's journey back to his daughter, Sophia's slow return to life, the way this broken family was learning to be whole again, it reminded Lily that healing was always possible, even when it seemed hopeless. But it also reminded her of something
else, something she'd been trying not to think about. She was getting too attached.
To Sophia, certainly, but also to Marcus.
To his quiet strength, his vulnerability, his determination to be better for his daughter. To the way he looked at her sometimes, like she was performing miracles instead of just doing her job. To the life they were building together in this glass tower above the city. And attachment was dangerous, because Lily's job was to heal families and then leave, to move on to the next case, the next trauma, the next child who needed saving. She'd never had trouble maintaining boundaries before, but something about this assignment felt different,
felt personal,
felt like home, which meant it was almost time to start thinking about leaving.
Because that's what she did. She fixed what was broken, and then disappeared before anyone could depend on her too much. Before she could depend on it.
It was safer that way.
Cleaner.
But watching Marcus rock his daughter, listening to him pour his heart out in that nursery, Lily found herself wondering if safety and cleanliness were worth the cost of walking away from something real.
The smile for weeks. That's how long Lily had been living in the Thorne penthouse, sleeping in the guest room down the hall from the nursery, existing in the intimate bubble of this grieving family's recovery.
4 weeks of early mornings and late nights, of feeding schedules and developmental exercises, of watching Marcus slowly transform from a ghost into a father. 4 weeks of falling in love with a baby who wasn't hers and developing feelings for a man she had no business caring about. It was a Saturday morning, unseasonably warm for early November.
when everything changed. Marcus had suggested taking Sophia outside, actually outside, not just to the terrace, but to the park.
It was the first time he'd proposed leaving the penthouse for anything other than a doctor's appointment since Elena's death. "Are you sure?"
Lily had asked,
studying his face for signs of panic or retreat.
"That's a big step, I'm sure." Marcus had Sophia in his arms, dressed in a tiny jacket covered in ducks that Elena had bought months before her death.
"She needs sunshine, fresh air, normal baby experiences, and I need to stop hiding in this apartment like the outside world doesn't exist." So they'd gone to Central Park, Marcus pushing the stroller with Lily walking beside him, and it felt almost normal. People jogged past, other parents navigated crying toddlers, dogs chased tennis balls.
Life, continuing in all its messy glory, indifferent to personal tragedy.
They found a quiet spot near the pond, away from the crowds, and spread a blanket on the grass.
Sophia, now alert and engaged in ways she hadn't been a month ago, looked around with wide eyes, taking in the trees, the water, the vast sky above.
She'd never really experienced the outdoors. Born in April, lost her mother in July, retreated into near Catatonia by August. This was new territory. "Look at her," Marcus said, wonder in his voice. "She's actually looking at things, interested in the world." Lily positioned Sophia on her lap, facing outward so she could see everything.
"She's almost 10 months old now."
This is when babies really start engaging with their environment.
Sophia's right on schedule, developmentally. "You've caught her up, Marcus."
"You've actually done it. We've done it," he corrected, his eyes meeting Lily's with an intensity that made her heart skip.
"I couldn't have duck." Lily interrupted suddenly, pointing at a mallard waddling near the pond's edge.
She made the sound quack quack, in that exaggerated way adults do with babies, hoping to elicit a response.
Sophia's head turned toward the duck.
Her eyes followed its movement. And then, for the first time in 5 months, for the first time since her mother's death, Sophia smiled.
It wasn't a big smile.
Barely there, really, just a slight upturn of her tiny mouth and a brightening of her eyes. But it was real, genuine, a response to joy rather than emptiness, a smile.
Marcus made a sound, half laugh, half sob. "Did she just?" She smiled. Lily's voice was thick with emotion. "Oh my God, Marcus," she smiled. And as if to prove it wasn't a fluke, Sophia did it again, looking at the duck, then at Lily, then at her father, and smiling. Small, uncertain, but unmistakably happy. Marcus dropped to his knees beside them, his face transformed by wonder and relief and love.
"Hey, baby girl, that's it.
That's my girl.
You smiled. Can you do it again?" He made a funny face, crossing his eyes and sticking out his tongue, something he would have been mortified to do in public a month ago, and Sophia's smile widened.
Then she laughed.
It was barely a sound, more of a breathy exhale with a hint of giggle. But it was laughter. Real, honest-to-God baby laughter. The sound of joy. Marcus pulled Sophia into his arms, holding her against his chest, his shoulders shaking with sobs. "You're back.
You came back to me."
Thank you, baby. Thank you." Lily turned away, giving them privacy, swiping at her own tears. This was what she lived for, these moments of breakthrough, when children who'd given up decided to try again.
When families broken by tragedy found ways to be whole again.
This was why she did this work, why she poured herself into other people's pain.
Because moments like this made everything worth it.
But watching Marcus hold his daughter,
seeing them reconnect over something as simple as a duck and a smile, Lily felt something else too. A hollow ache in her chest that had nothing to do with professional satisfaction and everything to do with knowing this her family.
This wasn't her life. She was just passing through, a temporary fixture who'd help them heal before moving on to the next case.
"Lily," Marcus's voice pulled her back.
He was looking at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Gratitude, certainly, but something deeper too. "Come here, you should be part of this." She hesitated, knowing it was dangerous to get more enmeshed, but unable to resist. She moved closer, and Marcus shifted Sophia so she could see both of them.
The baby looked up at Lily and smiled again, reaching one small hand toward her face.
"Thank you," Marcus said softly, "for all of this,
for not giving up on us, for showing me how to be her father again, for saving her life."
"For saving mine. I didn't save anyone," Lily protested. "You did the work, both of you."
You gave us hope when we had none. You showed us that love was stronger than grief.
"You made us believe we could survive this." Marcus's free hand found hers, his fingers interlacing with hers in a gesture that felt far too intimate for a professional relationship.
"I don't know how to thank you for that." Lily looked down at their joined hands, feeling panic and desire warring in her chest.
This was wrong. She was crossing lines, letting personal feelings interfere with professional boundaries. She should pull away, remind him she was just the nanny, re-establish the distance that made leaving possible. But she didn't. She let her hand stay in his, let herself be part of this moment, this family, this fragile thing they were building together. Just for a little while longer, they stayed in the park for 2 hours, and Sophia smiled 17 more times. Lily counted, cataloguing each one like treasure. At the ducks, at falling leaves, at a dog that barked nearby, at her father's face, at Lily's singing, at absolutely nothing except the joy of being alive and present in the world. By the time they returned to the penthouse, Sophia was exhausted, falling asleep in Marcus's arms in the elevator. He carried her to the nursery and laid her in the crib with a tenderness that made Lily's throat tight. This man who'd been so broken, so lost, was now kissing his daughter's forehead and tucking her blanket around her with practiced ease. I can't believe we almost lost her, Marcus whispered, staring down at Sophia's sleeping face. If you hadn't come when you did, if I'd waited even another week. But you didn't, Lily said firmly. You made the call. You chose to try. That took courage, Marcus. That took strength. He turned to face her, and Lily saw that his eyes were red-rimmed but clearer than they'd been since she'd arrived. I'm not sure I could have done it without you. Actually, I'm certain I couldn't have. You've become. He paused, seeming to struggle for words. Essential to both of us. The word hung in the air between them, loaded with meaning that neither of them was quite ready to acknowledge. Essential, not just helpful, not just a good nanny, but necessary, integral, part of their lives in a way that transcended professional relationships. Marcus, Lily began, knowing she needed to address this, to pull back before things got more complicated. But she was interrupted by her phone buzzing in her pocket. She pulled it out, glancing at the screen. Parker's touch her agency. Her boss, Patricia, probably calling about the next case, the next family that needed her help. Reality, intruding on the bubble they built. I should take this, Lily said apologetically. It's work. She stepped into the hallway, answering with her professional voice. Lily Parker. Lily, it's Patricia. How are things with the Thorne case? Her boss's voice was warm but businesslike. Good, really good actually. Sophia smiled today. Real, genuine smiles. She's eating well, gaining weight, engaging with her environment. I'd say we're past the critical phase. That's wonderful news. I knew you were the right person for this. Patricia paused, and Lily heard papers shuffling in the background. Which brings me to why I'm calling. We have a new case. Emergency placement. 3-year-old boy. Parents killed in a home invasion last week. Grandparents are taking custody, but they're in their 70s and overwhelmed. The child is nonverbal, violent, clearly traumatized. They need someone immediately. Lily's stomach clenched. This was her job, moving from case to case, helping families in crisis, never staying long enough to become attached. But the thought of leaving Marcus and Sophia now, just when they were finding their footing, felt like tearing of her own skin. When would they need me? She asked, her voice carefully neutral. As soon as possible. I know you typically do 6 to 8 week placements, and you've only been with the Thornes for a month. But if they're stabilized, if the crisis has passed, can I have a day to think about it? Lily asked. To discuss transition with the family? Of course. But Lily, this child really needs you. The grandparents specifically requested you after hearing about your work. They're desperate. After hanging up, Lily stood in the hallway, staring at family photos of people she'd never met but felt like she knew intimately. Elena smiling on her wedding day. Marcus looking younger and happier than she'd ever seen him. Them together, radiantly in love. She'd known this moment would come, had been preparing for it even, but knowing didn't make it easier. Because somewhere in the past 4 weeks, she'd stopped thinking of this as just another case. She'd started thinking of it as home. Bad news? Marcus's voice made her jump. He'd emerged from the nursery, his expression concerned. New case, Lily said, trying to keep her voice steady. Emergency placement. 3-year-old who lost both parents. Understanding dawned in Marcus's eyes, followed quickly by something that looked like panic. You're leaving? I don't know. I haven't decided. But Marcus, this is what I do. I help families through crisis, and then I move on to the next one. You knew this was temporary. Temporary, he repeated, the word bitter in his mouth. Right. Of course. You have other families to save. Other broken people who need you more than we do. It's not about need, Lily protested. It's about where I can make the most difference. Sophia is thriving now. She smiled today. She laughed. The worst is over. You can handle this without me. What if I don't want to handle it without you? The question was quiet, but devastating.
What if I need you to stay?
Not for Sophia, but for me.
Lily's breath caught.
This was the thing she'd been afraid of. The line she tried so hard not to cross. Marcus.
I know you have a job to do. I know there are other children who need you. But Lily, you're not just our nanny anymore. You're family.
He moved closer, his hand reaching out to cup her cheek. You're the first thing I think about when I wake up and the last thing I think about before I sleep. You're the reason I laugh now. The reason I look forward to tomorrow.
How am I supposed to just let you walk away?